Hello everybody, this is Jay Goodison from Encodian. So today we're going to continue our series on our utility actions and we're going to focus in on encrypting and decrypting data within Power Automate using our AES Encryption and AES Decryption utility actions. So having a quick look at the documentation, you'll see that the AES Encryption and both the decryption actions are found within our utility connector within Power Automate, and you can have a quick look at the parameters that we need to provide in. So we need to provide a value that we're going to encrypt. We need to provide the output type, so that the format of the data we're going to generate, so whether that's base 64 or hex. We need to provide a key, or sometimes referred to as a secret, that's going to be used by the algorithm to actually encrypt the data, and we can have a 16, 24 or 32-bit character key. And then from a mode perspective, we can choose between 3, CBC, CFB and ECB, noting that if you go with CBC or CFB, then you must provide an initialization vector, which is a 16-character string, which is effectively used to harden the encryption. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to build a really simple flow to show you how you can use the action to encrypt a data value. And then we'll equally well create another flow to do the decryption, so we can see that process working end to end. It's not a real world scenario because the focus here is about how the actions work and how you can actually pass data and actually use that encrypted data and then later on decrypt it. But of course, as you watch the video, just think about how you might use that in your own real world solution. So perhaps you have some data that you need to store in a Dataverse table or a SharePoint list, but you want to store it encrypted just to give you that element of extra security. So let's kick things off. We'll go into creating a instant cloud flow. We'll choose a trigger, and I'll just give this flow a title and Encrypt. And I'm going to ask the user for a value, and we'll call that value data, and that's the value that we're going to encrypt. Now the next thing we're going to do is create two variables, one for the key that's used to encrypt the data, key, let's just copy that action there, paste an action, and we'll create a second one which we'll call IV, which will be used as the initialization vector. Right, so we need to set some values in here, and it's perhaps quite obvious. The values that we set, here's a key, and I'm using a 16-character key, and the IV is always a 16 characters in length, so whereas the key can be 16, 24 or 32. These values must be, when they're used to actually encrypt the data, have to be used exactly the same values when you're decrypting later on. So we've made a note of those, and we'll use the same values again when we do the decryption flow. So let's add the AES encryption action from the utilities connector. So let's pop this in here, and we're going to choose the data value or property coming from the user. We're going to set the key to the key and the IV vector to IV. And we don't need to change any of those other variables. That will now, with that configuration, will encrypt the data value being provided by the user. Now the last thing I'm going to do, just so that we can see those values coming through, I'm going to send myself an email just containing that value. So we'll just do AES and data, and we'll select the result property from the AES encryption action. That's the value that contains the encrypted data, or the property that contains the encrypted data. So let's save and we can run this. Click continue, provide a value that we wish to encrypt, so we'll use Encodian. We'll click done. And we can see that's run through, and I will receive an email at any moment that contains that encrypted value. Okay, so let's just bring this email around. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to copy that encrypted value. We're going to use that now in our decryption flow to actually decrypt that data value. So let's just pop that into Notepad. Okay, so the next thing to do is we're going to actually create the decryption flow. And just checking the documentation again, you can see very, very similarly to the encryption flow, we need to provide the data that we're going to, in this case, decrypt. We need to make sure that the input type, the key, the mode, and the IV are exactly the same as what was used for when we encrypted the data, quite obviously. So let's generate another flow here. Just give this a name, AES Decrypt. And we'll again add a manual input for the user called data. And let's add those same variables in. So we've got key, string, and we may as well set that value now whilst we're here. And we'll just do it this way this time. And this time we're going to set this one as a string, an IV. Value, let's get rid of those speech marks. Okay, oh, didn't set the title of that one correctly. Just come back in and just change that to make sure it's correct. Now we can add the AES Decryption from the utilities connector. And we're going to pass in the data from the user, with the data property. We've set the input type as base64 because that's what we used when we did the encryption. Again, we'll provide the key, the same mode, which is CBC, and the initialization vector. And what we'll do again is we'll send an email so we can see the decrypted value. AES Decrypt data, and let's select again the decrypted value. As with all of the Encodian utility actions, actually is found in the result property. So let's just save, and then we can run this, and we're going to pass in the value that was emailed to us previously. So we'll click Run Flow. Click Done, and that's going to run through. Excellent. So again, I'm going to receive an email in a moment containing that decrypted value. Okay, so here's the email, and we can see that value has been correctly decrypted. So hopefully that gives you a good example of how you can use these actions to encrypt and then decrypt your data. Obviously, this is clearly a very basic example, but you can consider how you can use this type of approach to secure data within the Power Platform. Maybe we put data in SharePoint lists or data first, we said, or wherever it could be, so SQL, whatever the situation or scenario might be for yourselves. If you do need any assistance, please email us at support@encodian.com, or you can visit us at our support portal at support.encodian.com.